I gained a lot of respect for the Wuthering Waves team when I saw that they not only went out of their way to rework the entire game from scratch in basically 6 months, but they actually apologized to us for the bad experiences that a lot of us had in CBT 1. That takes a lot of humility, and I absolutely respect these devs for it. If you're watching this video, just please go down in the comments and leave a word for the developer team. Let them know that they are appreciated. And with that said, let's get into the video, shall we? In my previous video, I actually speculated that if the characters who meet the rover at the start, being confirmed as Yangyang and Chisha, and maybe Baidian, I'm not sure about Baidian, if these characters were no longer as wary of the rover as they were at the start of the story, then most probably the entire story got reworked. And the devs basically confirmed this when they said that they've reworked 90% of the story. Now, when they say 90% of the story, it's not very easy to understand. Another word that they use to describe it is basically they reworked the world building concepts that were used to create the world. Now, for those of you who don't fully understand this, and if I understand this properly, they've basically changed the base history of the world. So in essence, these Twitter posts may not have any relevance anymore. The previous dev notes on characters probably have gotten changed, and that's probably why you cannot find them anymore. For example, in CBT 1, we had a story about Sui Chuang, I do not know how to pronounce that name, fighting with the Threnodian crownless 50 years ago. Has that been changed? Has the lament been changed? The way it started, the way it affects people, does it cause different things now from what we had in CBT 1? Like, that's like an idea of how deep they've gone. If I fully understand them, they've basically rewritten all of these things, and they did all of this in 6 months. That is not an easy feat, and I do have a worry when it comes to that 6-month mark, but I'll get to that in just a little bit. I also wanted to highlight the fact that they've also given characters new story, and they've also changed some characters' names. So Bailian's name is now Baiji, and if you look at this Twitter post, you actually know the meaning of Baiji. Now, if you remember the original dev notes that were used in the design of Bailian, you will know that she was called a cold beauty, and I believe that calling her a flower, especially a flower that can be used as medicine, is actually very fitting for her character, as she is a flower that people don't touch easily, but she's also a healer in the game. I really do love this. But one question that I have with everything that they've said so far is, how much did they waste to actually get all of these changes done? Like, many people may not understand this, but it takes money to basically create all the voiceovers, all the designs, all the animations, everything. And for CBT 1, they had actually teased that there would be voiceovers, because when we look at the clip,
You're finally awake, Rover.
we see that Yangyang had a voice, which means that they had already voice acted most of these things. They had to overhaul all of these things and redo them. That is a lot of money being put down the drain. Like, you guys are going to hear me saying this 6-month mark repeatedly over and over and over. It's because I want to hammer it in how much these guys have actually done for us. I don't want this game to fail. I really do not want this game to fail, and I want people to understand that this is not a matter that should be taken lightly. Now, as for the concerns that I have over the story, now basically, because these guys did all of these reworks in 6 months, I'm worried that there may not have been enough time to flesh out some sides of the story. And I think that the devs actually share this sentiment, because when Dong talked about how they still have a long way to go, I personally don't think that he was being humble. I think he was being honest here, and he was trying to prepare us ahead of time for the impending story that may come. It's always a given that not everyone is going to 100% like everything. But if they're telling us ahead of time that we may not like it, I think we should prepare for the worst. I'm not saying that the story will be bad, but I am saying prepare for the worst. Some parts of the story may not be fleshed out. They've already told us that voiceovers are not there, and probably there's a good reason for that. Maybe they're just trying to be safe, to make sure that if anything needs to be changed, then they wouldn't have wasted money on the voiceovers. Like, I just hope that this really goes well for them. When it comes to the combat, there were lots of things that people complained about, but one of the things that people complained about the most, which I actually personally never noticed, was the camera shake. Now, camera shake, has actually been addressed by the devs, so we will no longer have that. And actually, when I look at the footage side by side now, I sort of now see it. It was never noticeable to me to a degree where it's like this is game breaking, but I guess for some people it actually was. So I am still glad that they actually fixed it. Another thing that they then fixed was the camera position when you're locked on. They also made the lock-on UI a lot cleaner, which I actually like. It makes it a lot easier for me to tell which person I'm targeting and which person I'm not targeting. But then whenever you're locked onto an enemy, the camera actually zooms out, at least from what I see. In this fight against the Crownless, the camera is zoomed out quite a bit, so you're now able to quite easily see everywhere around you. So even if there are multiple enemies, you're not just locked onto one enemy. You can be able to see multiple enemies, and you can also be able to see the attacks that the enemy is going to carry out just before they actually carry it out. It makes it a lot easier for us, and I actually appreciate this. I didn't know this was something that I actually needed. Another thing that they talked about was the QTEs. Now, I'm a little confused if this QTE is what they call the concerto effect. I'm not 100% sure, but what they've renamed QTEs to now is intro and outro skill. Now, when I saw them actually talk about the intro and outro skill, I was a little confused because I didn't understand the difference, but I think I understand the difference. Now, according to my inference, it's not that much different from what we already had in CBT 1. So basically, from my understanding, the intro skill happens at the same time as the outro skill. The character that is coming into the battle after the other character is going to do the outro skill, while the character that is leaving the battlefield is going to do the intro skill. In this clip that you see here, Jian does one final hit right before Anchor enters. And then if we move forward a little bit, we then see that Encore actually does a skill right before Jian enters, and then Jian actually does his skill. That is basically how it works. It's not that much different from what we had in CBT 1. Now, what I don't know is whether we're getting buffs and debuffs based on elements or anything like that. This is something that remains to be seen. And then there was another combat thing that they didn't talk about immediately, and it's also not that clear, but it seems like you can now use specific echoes to parry specific attacks. In this clip, we see that when the Crownless is about to do this dive attack, we can then use an echo that does an uppercut attack to then parry that attack. Now, it remains to be seen whether we can do this with just any echo. I believe personally that it's with specific echoes that you'll be able to do these kinds of specific attacks. That remains to be seen. And since we're already talking about echoes, let's move on to that. The main thing to talk about when we come to the echoes section is about the rare echoes. Now, we don't have an official name for what these echoes will be called, but basically, when you're out and about in the open world, you're going to see echoes, rarely, that will have a different color from the other echoes. So basically, they are rare finds, and if you're able to kill them and capture them, you will have a rare echo that you can now show to your friends. Now, this really plays in with what I wanted to see in my last video where I talked about the things that fans wanted. Why don't we have an event where we can use our echoes to fight with others? Because if I want to fight my friend, I would definitely want to fight him with my fancy echo that I found that he probably does not have. Another major thing, which I don't know how I feel about this, I see the advantages, but I'm also sort of skeptical about it, is the way we farm echoes now. So, in CBT 1, all you needed to do to farm echoes was to go out into the open world. Whenever you kill an enemy, they have a chance to drop an echo. But that had the disadvantage of you having to go out every time to hunt for an echo. And because whenever you're fighting enemies in the open world, the chances of you getting an echo are not very high, it also means that sometimes you might fight a lot of enemies, but you may not get a lot of echoes. So I like the fact that they introduced this feature where you can now go to a tacit field. Basically, it's like artifact domains, but then in the open world, where you can now challenge the tacit field, and after you beat all the enemies in the tacit field, you can now gain echoes that you have already captured. You cannot gain an echo that you have not captured. So in a way, it still pushes people to go out and explore, but then it doesn't at the same time punish the people who don't want to continue doing exploration all the time. If you explore once and you get everything that you need in one area, you don't need to go back there just because of specific echoes. You can now just go to the tacit fields and farm them. And this is not confirmed, but I think that you can still go out into the open world and still farm echoes as usual, but then that will not require stamina. But when you farm in the tacet field, you will then need stamina. So basically, it sort of like makes it faster for you to gear up a character, because if you use all your energy in a tacet field, you can then go out to the open world and continue to farm until maybe you have enough energy to come back to the tacet field and try again. I think it's fine, but I don't know, there's this feeling that I cannot put into words about this system that bugs me, and I don't know what it is. I feel like something is not complete with the system. I don't know yet. Maybe if I'm able to get into the next closed beta test, I'll be able to tell. Now, some other minor details are the way the echoes are now shown in the echo gallery. I don't really care about this, to be honest. Don't get me wrong, it's good that we have some improvements to the UI here, but I really did not mind how it looked in the other version. As much as I know that I don't even appreciate this, I know that a lot of work went into this, especially this echo showcase where you can see your echoes like a figurine. It's nice. It's nice. That's all I can say. Now, I'm not going to dwell too much on the other things that they talked about, but I will talk about the characters last and then I'll end off the video. We finally have the name of the girl and the guy that we talked about in the previous video. The girl's name is Jianxin, and when I saw this idle animation that she had, I had a sneaking suspicion that someone somewhere out in the world was thinking that this is the female version of Kazuha. I mean, I don't mind if you think that she's a female version of Kazuha. As long as she does her work well, she does her work well. Jianxin is actually a character that uses a real life martial art. They call it this, but then when I googled it, it came out to this. And basically it's a style that focuses on both defense and offense. So basically it's more of using defense to then create an opening to create a very strong offense. And from what the devs talked about, it seems like she has an exclusive parry skill, maybe similar to how Tao Chi works. And basically, if you manage to get off that exclusive skill, she gets a shield, from what I'm seeing on the screen, but I'm not sure. Ling Yang is not a copy of Gaming. I've already said this before, and we just have to wait and see how he plays. But from what I see, he's very much different from Gaming. We also have character redesigns. Now, Shinkai actually posted this on his YouTube, and all the credit goes to him. Basically, we can see the new redesigns of the characters, and one thing that I knew a lot of people complained about that I know that they have changed is Yangyang's chest. I did not want to talk about this, but I knew that there would be people who would talk about it. Plus, I'm also using it to know how many people got to the end of the video. But Yangyang's chest has finally been buffed again. She looks much bigger than before. And one of the things that the devs talked about was how they wanted to emphasize the beauty of human bodies. And to me, that just translates to all you cultured people, we now have Jiggle physics. And the Jiggle physics, they are real. They are very real. So for those of you who care about these kinds of a thing, rejoice. Even though I know that you will not even need these things in a fight, but okay, no problem. There are also some new things like dynamic environments. One question that I have about the environment, they talked about how you're going to have some exclusive abnormal weather in some areas, but it sounded like as though they said it's only going to happen in story mode and not like in the open world. And I remember that during the technical test, this was one of the requests that fans had. Having open world events that happen at random that can maybe bring in enemies or just cause a certain kind of debuff or something just at random at different places. This is somewhat close. I don't know whether it happens outside of story, but from everything we've seen, it doesn't seem like it's going to happen outside of the story mode, which is sad because I would have really liked to see that, but it is nice to see. There are a lot of things to talk about, but because the video is just getting way too long for my liking, I'll end it off here. Thank you all so much for watching. What else did you notice in this devlog that I did not talk about? Let me know in the comments down below. Oh yes, later on today, there's going to be a special podcast episode with me, No Christ No Life, Lover Pixel, and Connor's Thoughts. All of us will be discussing, and you will find that video on No Christ No Life's channel. So just head over to his channel, watch that video, and I hope you guys enjoy it. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll catch you in the next video. Peace, guys.